When you live to tick it before you kick it, it's pretty important that you power your adventure with the right nutrition. Not just when you decide to take on the biggest physical and mental challenge of your life, like I did retracing the 1928 Tour de France, but also as a part of everyday living. Working overtime on a double shift, running the kids all over town to their sporting events, adding a few extra miles to your weekly hike, or getting sleep deprived with a hectic travel schedule. I'm proud to announce BUCKiT Nutrition is now an official sponsor of our podcast, and just for you, giving a 10% discount on all BUCKiT nutritional products. Go to Amazon.com and use promo code BUCKiT10, that's BUCKiT with an IT, 10, for a 10% discount on BUCKiT nutritional products. Great tasting, high-performance nutrition to help you tick it before you kick it. On a snowy winter night in Chicago 2000, a 25-year-old budding writer finds a note on his windscreen. It reads, "Mario, I hate you. You said you had to be at work, and then why is your car here at her place? You're a liar. I hate you. I hate you, Amber. P.S. Page me later." This eloquent, misplaced missive would soon join scores of other found notes and abandoned letters, eventually landing David Rothbart on David Letterman and kickstarting a professional people-watching on paper career.
I knew I couldn't go back.
Changes your
You just
life.
put it out there.
She said you've got less than a year to live.
Just dug even
Luck
deeper.
is the residue of design.
Nobody else was doing it, so why couldn't I?
That was the turning point.
Welcome to the BUCKiT Podcast with Phil Keoghan. Every week I talk to mavericks, disruptors, and innovators. People who ditch the excuses, swerve off the predictable road, and epitomize what it means to tick it before you kick it.
You make sacrifices and I think too, like even your failures, you know, when you look back, you know, yeah, I could have had more money, and even those failures, like you have to enjoy it while you're doing it too.
David Rothbart is a national best-selling author and a frequent contributor to public radio's This American Life. He writes regularly for GQ and Los Angeles Magazine, and his articles have also appeared in The New Yorker and The New York Times. He's also a well-respected filmmaker. Medora, a documentary he produced about an underdog high school basketball team who fight to end their losing streak, won an Emmy in 2015, and his latest powerful passion project, 17 Blocks, which follows a Washington, D.C. family dealing with a harsh life in a neighborhood plagued by poverty, drugs, and violence, recently premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival to strong reviews. But more than the impressive professional credentials that Davy has, the best way to describe him is that he's a brilliant storyteller who delights in observing human nature and presenting it in an insightful, humorous, heartwarming, and refreshingly candid way. His style strikes a chord with just about everyone because somehow you either recognize yourself or someone you know, especially in My Heart's an Idiot, a book about Davy trying to find love in all the wrong places, something that a lot of us can relate to. I had the immense pleasure of sitting down with Davy recently when he poked his head up from writing, producing, and people watching. I wanted the chance to get inside the curious mind of this fascinating person who clearly has an insatiable appetite for meeting people, spontaneous adventures, and for living life to the fullest. Well, I am with Davy Rothbart. We are in Los Angeles, and we're ready to have a little chat. Lots to talk about.
That's right.
Excited to talk to you.
Me too.
It seems like you're like me. You're fascinated with human behavior, understanding people, how they tick, what makes them work.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? That passion?
I think it came from my parents.
Yeah.
My dad is the kind of guy who's, just the friendly mayor, not actually the mayor, of course, but just
that mayor type.
Yeah. And so I'd walk into a diner with my dad, and by within 20 minutes the waiter or waitress would be like sitting down with us. Now they'd be chatting long enough, they'd look around, they'd be like, "Oh, I'll just take my break and just sit down with you guys," and he'd be asking them questions about their lives, and my mom, she's deaf, first of all, but she also has been doing counseling, like spirit. She channels an ancient spirit named Aaron, and people, and she also just sort of helps people through
all
through
your
their
life.
problems.
This was happening.
Well, since I was like maybe 10, 12 years old.
Right.
And she also, so people started calling her for really just guidance and in their own lives. And it wasn't wacky too wacky of new age stuff. It was really more like someone would call and say, my teenage daughter ran away and we're trying to find her. Can you as a psychic, can you like help us find? And by the way, this is before the technology advanced. So I was the one helping my mom handle these phone calls even when I was like 8, 12, 15 years old. And my mom would say, well, maybe I could locate your daughter for you, but even if you just sent the police there and dragged her back, like it's not gonna improve the issues around why she's left. So let's talk about those things instead.
Wow. And your mom became a counselor in that moment?
So she's been counseling people ever since. But throughout my childhood, I was just translating on the calls. I was telling my mom, using sign language, telling them what they were saying on the phone, and then she would take the phone and
the amount of information that you would have been soaking up.
Exactly.
About human behavior,
yes,
human interaction.
Yeah, I think I just got drawn into the power and of other people's stories and just became sort of endlessly curious, like you.
Yeah, I think to be curious is a wonderful gift, and I got that also from my parents.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, the house would be filled with people that my mom and dad had just met.
Yeah.
And we, as kids, my sister and I, we had to just deal with it.
Yeah.
And you had to suddenly strike up a conversation with a stranger.
Yeah.
And it forced you to interact.
I relate to that so much because my mom, eventually her meditation center grew and they had their own building. But for most of the time when I was a kid, it was our house. Right. So there was classes there in the living room. There would, I'd get up on a Saturday morning in my boxers to like eat a bowl of cereal and watch cartoons, and the house would be, there'd be 20 people milling around the kitchen. So like you said, it was, you were forced to interact and you started learning people's stories. And a lot of her longtime students are now their family, they're like my uncles and aunts kind of thing. So you experienced that, and
well,
was it hard? Was it ever challenging? Were you ever frustrated?
Well, only because I had to give up my room so much because my mom and dad would ask people over to stay, and then my sister and I had to give up our room so people could stay there.
You'd crash on the couch,
we'd have to sleep wherever.
Yeah.
And my mom had 80 music students, so she's a music teacher, and then my dad being a scientist, and there were just always people. They were just always inviting people in. I've told this story before about my mom picking up some sailors she saw on the side of the road when we were in Antigua. Uh-huh. They were trying to find a laundromat. My mom said, no, just come and do the laundry at our place. So next thing there would be like 4 sailors in the house.
She saw the value, it sounds like, of what bringing people into your lives can do.
Yeah.
And how, while she was doing them a favor, but all of a sudden that day turned from a drab day, doing whatever, to like, hey, here's these guys we can talk to about, and they're sailors, so they've been traveling all over the world themselves.
Yeah, and it led to these long-term friendships that you're talking about.
Yes.
And I think what it taught me too is just being open to the idea of meeting people.
Absolutely.
And it's incredible to me how many people are scared to just talk to a stranger. I encourage people to talk to people in an elevator, like talk to a stranger.
Yeah,
because that might scare some people.
Yeah. So, but it's funny though that you frame it that way too, because that was my dad. I've been thinking about him a lot. He had a bad stroke a year ago. He's been in tough shape, but he's hanging in there, and which is awesome. And but he used to preach that engagement, engaging with people and being open, and actually to the point where as a kid I was embarrassed by him because he was talking to everybody, and I was like, Dad, like, shut up, leave these people alone. And, but standing on a train platform or wherever he was always just striking up conversations with strangers. But the thing is, it always left everybody smiling, feeling good. Yeah. I like at first people were sometimes, who's this dude? Like, why is he talking to us? And then, 10 minutes later, everyone's smiling and sharing their info, passing on, hey, well, next time you're in Topeka, Kansas, like, come say hi, And so I just saw firsthand the meaning of the value of engaging with people, and honestly, I caught it. I guess it doesn't skip a generation. I got it direct from him, and but it has made my life richer and a better storyteller. Yeah.
When my father-in-law says, when you're transmitting, you can't receive, which I think is so great as a storyteller like yourself.
Wow, what a great way to put it. Yeah, like a walkie-talkie, when you have the button pressed down and you're talking, you're not, no one can talk to you.
Yeah. We have a mutual friend who's an amazing, I guess you could call him an artist, really. He mixes sound. I mean, he really is an artist. He's so good. He mixed Le Ride, a film that we made about retracing 1928 Tour de France.
That's right.
Did he mix a film that you were working on?
Yes, yeah. My new film, it's called 17 Blocks.
Yes.
And it's fun to say new since we started working on it in 1999.
Are you serious? It's been that long?
Yeah, so I was a young guy, like right out of college, and I moved to DC. On a basketball court, I love playing basketball. A lot of my great friendships have been built on basketball courts, including this one. So I met this young guy named Smurf. He was like 15. And then his little brother, Emmanuel, used to just hang around the court. He was 9 years old at the time. And I just bought my first video camera. I really wanted to learn filmmaking. So I would give the camera to Emmanuel so he wouldn't bug us. You know, he was only 9. And then I started looking at the footage he was shooting, and it was really something. You know, he had
insightful.
he had a poetic eye, and he would film just nice images around what is a very rough neighborhood. They lived 17 blocks behind the U.S. Capitol building.
Hence the name.
Right, is why we call the movie 17 Blocks. But it was known at the time as one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in the U.S. But Emmanuel, and I met their sister Denise and their mom Cheryl. And the way Cheryl puts it is that they adopted me, which is kind of true because I was a little lost at the time. And even though I had a great family, like I was very far away from them. And they kind of took me in, and I started spending every day at their house. And we would wander around the neighborhood just interviewing people on the street. Emmanuel and I would interview each other, and then I would just leave my camera there with him, so he would film his family and his friends and other things in the neighborhood. He'd invite his neighbors in and ask them about their lives, or we kind of tag team interview them, you know, and then he would do that with his brother and sister and his mom, and that we continued that for 10 years. I moved out of DC, but I kept coming back. So he graduated high school at that time. He was 18 or 19.
So 18 or 19, yeah.
And he was the first in his family to graduate high school. He started training to be a firefighter, and was also engaged to his high school girlfriend. That year, a few months after graduation, there was shooting in his neighborhood, and Emmanuel died. And you know, I was there the next day. I was in Michigan. I got there the next day, and his mom Cheryl said, "Where's the cameras?" And I said, "What do you mean? Like I was here to help. I'm just here to help. Whatever." And she said, "You don't understand. Like this is such a common thing. Like so many kids in our neighborhood are killed every week. A lot of her friends had lost their children to gun violence, but she said no one's been documented as thoroughly throughout their entire life as Emmanuel. Like people will finally get it, rather than just being like a number, a statistic, or some abstract concept." Which
is the opposite of what you would have imagined hearing her say, right?
Because
if you had you turned up with cameras, you probably would have thought this is totally inappropriate.
Absolutely, because it's the most raw,
gut-wrenching thing. You have a child. You can't even imagine.
Yeah, you can't imagine losing a kid and right on your in front of your house, you know. And so, but she said that's why she knew the pain that she was and heartbreak that she was going to be walking through in the days and weeks and really months that would follow, and she wanted
that out there.
Yes, she wanted people to be able to put themselves in her shoes. So what did you do? And so I filmed her, Smurf and Denise, Emmanuel's siblings, and Cheryl too, and we filmed all of it. And I mean, you know, they go to visit. There's a T-shirt shop down the street that sells R.I.P. memorial T-shirts, and that's the sole function basically of this shop. Is just it's just, you know, just to sell T-shirts that you see their front window, and it's all the samples are all R.I.P. you know, with teenagers
people
on
who
there.
have passed.
Yeah, and you know, the film documents some pretty raw stuff, but now you could trace the victim of one of these shootings, like that are so common. You could trace it all the way back to when they were, you know, a little boy, like I've got on showing you.
How old is he in this photograph?
He's 9 years old. This is the year I met him. Now we thought we were done after a year of filming the aftermath, but by this point, his brother and sister, they had their own kids, and we just kept filming with them, and we kept filming until a few weeks ago. Because now Emmanuel's nephews and nieces, his brother and sister's kids, are the ages that they were when I met them. Huh. So now they're like 10,
That's
11, 12 years old. That's the next
coming.
generation. They're living in the same neighborhood. They're bright, curious, awesome kids. Justin, to Kale, Little Smurf, Smurf's oldest son, and
Little
Smurf they call him, yeah, and Faith is Justin's sister. So these kids, I mean, you see in Justin, Emmanuel's nephew, you just see Emmanuel when he was that age.
It's history repeating itself.
Yes, and so the question the film asks is like, how can we change the outcomes for kids like Justin and Little Smurf who are like growing up in the same neighborhood? And we saw what happened to Emmanuel, but like these kids are just as cool, just as curious, and deserve better, you know. And so it's 20 years in the life of this family, and I mean it's not even really out yet in the world. We premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival a few weeks ago in New York.
That's a fantastic festival.
It was great, and
congratulations.
Thank you. And
especially when you hear of a 20-year journey to make a film to finally see it.
I mean, that's another reason I think, you know, why it's worth engaging, and it's worth, I think, whenever you have ideas, just following them, because you don't know which ones will turn into something.
Well, you know what I think it speaks to the idea that you can wait for people to give you permission to do something, or you can just take it upon yourself to go with gut instinct. And you didn't know whether it was going to be just documenting a piece of American history, or that you'd end up at the Tribeca Film Festival,
right,
which is a huge achievement. There's something in all of us that is unique that nobody else has. There's some vision that you have. There's some story that needs to be told, that needs to come from your soul.
And only you can tell it.
Yeah.
Only you will have that idea. You know, with the Sanford family, you know, and we talked about ways we can change outcomes for kids in growing up in these kinds of neighborhoods. And so Cheryl had the idea after her son passed, you know, what can we do to change things so these kids just have different trajectory? And she remembered I always talked about, I love camping and hiking, and I always talked about taking Emmanuel camping and hiking, and I never did, and I regret that.
And would it be fair to say that these inner city kids have never seen nature the way you and I know nature?
Even in neighborhoods beyond their like 10-block radius, you know. So for a lot of these kids, like that's all they know. And Cheryl actually, I mean, she's so big-hearted. This is crazy, but 5 days after her son died, she wrote a poem to the two young men who had taken his life, forgiving them, praying for them, and she also said she wanted to give kids like them more opportunities. So she said, let's take kids from our neighborhood camping and hiking. And the first year it was just like 12 kids from their block. We went from Washington, D.C. to Mount Washington in New Hampshire. So we called it Washington to Washington. And we hiked up to the top of Mount Washington, which is it's not Everest, but it's you're up there, and there's winds, and
it's Everest for some people.
Yes, it's for a kid that's never left the city before. It's pretty incredible, and along with climbing a mountain, it was swimming and canoeing and camping, campfires, you know, s'mores, ghost stories.
How does it change their lives when they are exposed to something like this? People from a neighborhood like Emmanuel's.
You just see this openness, like kind of kids have sometimes steeled themselves off. They see a lot of rough things every day, and they have to deal with a lot. For protection, they've maybe closed themselves off a little bit, and it takes a day or two, and then you just see this melting, and you see smiles, you see kids like, you know, these things are fun, you know.
Like going to another planet.
Yes, and it's also, exactly, it's such, just gives them the sense of possibility. If all you've ever known
something else out there
is like, you know, is like just what's in your neighborhood, and like your idea of what's possible in the world, or what you might be interested in doing one day, or where you might want to visit or go, it's so limited. And the way we fund these trips, it's 100% volunteer. So 20 of my friends come as trip leaders, help out for free.
And the funding comes from?
The fund is just from ordinary people, like our friends, and just people see. It's called Washington to Washington.
Is there a website people can go to?
People go to the website washingtontowashington.org.
T-O, Washington.
Washington, T-O, Washington to Washington.org. And $200 is all it takes to get a kid out.
To take one kid.
Yeah, take one kid on the trip.
So you're a filmmaker, you're a philanthropist, writer, you're like a Renaissance man. Like how do you describe yourself?
I guess I usually say I'm a writer and filmmaker.
Storyteller.
Yeah, but storyteller is what it is. Yeah.
You're a contributor as a writer. You've written for GQ, right?
Yeah.
Right. And then you have a connection with This American Life.
Yeah. When I heard the radio show This American Life, I just thought, this is exactly my language. You know, like that sense of curiosity and
what is it about
wonder.
that show? It's just
The storytelling, it's so intricate, and it's also personal, and people often share really personal stories from their own life. So I did a story about my mom's deafness, and I did one. The first one I did was about Mr. Rogers. I interviewed all my neighbors in Chicago, where I was living at the time, about the conflicts they were having with each other, and then I played the tapes for Mr. Rogers, and like he mediated their disputes. And it wasn't just him. He pulled out all the puppets from the land of make-believe. He has X the Owl and King Friday, and he's doing all these voices and stuff. But he was talking about these adult problems in a very real world way, and he was so wise and had so many
He had this
insights.
ability to simplify a message.
Yes.
Especially talking to kids, just...
Totally. And he talked about real things with them. Death, divorce.
Things that really mattered.
Yeah. And things that were affecting kids, but that people normally wouldn't, talk to a kid about.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot from him just in the short time I had hanging with Mr. Rogers, and I got to do a lot of a dozen other stories like that for This American Life over the years. But one of the fun things that we did was after being a radio show for so long, Ira Glass, who's the host of the show,
yes.
he said let's do a live tour. Let's actually see our audience and be in front of them in person. And Ira asked me to come and bring Found Magazine with me and some of my favorite notes and share those.
So that takes us back to this dark and stormy night, 2000, right? And
right.
you see a message on a car?
Yeah. It was my car.
Oh, it was your car.
Yeah. So I came out of my.
I was gonna say, like, what are you doing looking at people's messages? No,
I saw. It was this winter night in Chicago, freezing my butt off, and I saw this folded up note on my windshield addressed to Mario. So I'm like, well, my name's Davy, not Mario, but let me see what this thing's all about. So I opened it up. This note to Mario.
I have it quoted exactly
here.
Oh yeah,
you want to
unless
share?
You remember it exactly.
You read it.
It says Mario,
and this is on my car.
Yeah, it's sitting on your car.
Yeah.
You're not Mario, but it's on your car. Mario, I fucking hate you. You said you have to work. Then why's your car here at her place? ? You're a fucking liar. Full stop. I hate you. I fucking hate you, Amber. P.S. Page me later.
Page me later, and that was the line that got me, I think, because
what a turn.
Yeah,
That's
a great turn. She's so angry, so upset with him, but still ultimately hopeful and in love a little bit. She's pissed off, but she still wants him to page her later. And I always wish she had left her pager number so I could have gotten in touch with her and said, like, it wasn't
it's not Mario, but I can be if you want me to be.
Yeah. Hey, maybe we should hang out. You seem like a passionate person.
Yeah.
But I started showing that note to my friends. The more people I shared that note with, the more friends of mine said, "Oh, I've got a great note. I found this to-do list last week, on the bus. I found this note blowing around the parking lot at the bowling alley, and love letters. Before I knew it, people were handing me and then mailing me love letters, to-do lists, journal entries.
God,
I started collecting these things. Yeah.
You opened a door big time, right?
Yes. I remember just sitting there one day thinking, like, I've been collecting all this found stuff, and I knew I wanted to share it with people. And I thought, well, I should make a magazine, like Found Magazine. I could just literally just put these notes and letters in it and let everybody.
I love the name, by the way, too.
Yeah.
Found.
I like things sometimes that are what they are. Me and my two cousins, who were like 15 and 10 or something, we spent a few days, and a couple other friends, we spent a few days just taping picking our favorite finds that I'd collected over the last year, taping them together and making a little zine. And we went to a Kinko's, I remember. We were going to make 50 copies, because that's how big my ambitions were. I was like, let's make 50 copies of this. And this punk rock kid was working behind the counter at 3 a.m, and he said, "Dude, this is awesome. Let's make 800. And I was like, "Oh, that sounds expensive." He's like, "No, man. I got the night shift. Like, let's just do this." And so we made 800. We collated. We stapled them together.
I like this quote you said. I think it's a mistake for folks to believe that you have to go out of your way to find things. It's more of a matter of simply keeping your eyes peeled during your everyday wanderings through the world. And you say that you've been publishing people's most private thoughts in Found Magazine now for, well, it's going to be...
Yes, 18 years.
18 years.
Yeah.
But you're saying, I guess that goes down to your observation skills, right? When you're curious, you become super observant, right? About what's around you.
True. Yeah, exactly. Like, I just tell people, you don't have to even go out looking for found notes and letters, just in your everyday wanderings through the world, on your way to school, on the way to work,
on the bus,
on the sidewalk, on the bus.
People leave things lying around.
And taking a second when you see a piece of paper laying there to pick it up and see if it's something interesting. My brother found this one in Ann Arbor, our hometown in Michigan. And this was like a nice looking sign. Someone had spent some time designing this thing. It's all typed up. It says, "After leaving the building, please lock this door. It will prevent unauthorized people from entering the building and defecating in the washing machine. Many thanks." And my, when people send in their finds, I always ask them to write, one line of interpretation or response, like whatever they think about that note. And so about this one, my brother always says, he says, "Be aware, that people who are allowed to defecate in the washing machine will be given a key for entry." So, and so, and some of the notes are heartbreaking. Some of them are quite sad. They run the gamut. They represent like the whole range of human experience. And that's why it's important to reach out and connect with people. And that's why even, there's something voyeuristic about this, but I think a certain amount of voyeurism is healthy. Because it's healthy to be curious about the people we share the world with and wonder what's their experience of being human is like. We made 800 copies and we had a party.
How many have you done since then?
And since then, so we've done 3 found books, 9 issues of the magazine. And, my brother and I have been all over the country. We do these found events where I read the finds and he plays songs. He's a great singer-songwriter. He writes songs based on some of these found notes, and we literally put them together then and still do now with scissors and tape, putting each page together.
But I think that's what makes it
fits with the content.
It has that tactile nature. And is there anything greater, really? I mean, my wife collects notes. She's kept all her notes. They're in big boxes.
Yeah.
I make sure that they're put away safely because they're love notes going. I don't read them, by the way.
Right.
But they're love notes. They go way back to when she, was young. But I also collect certain notes. I have every letter that my grandmother ever wrote me when I was in boarding school.
That's amazing.
They're a big stack of aerograms. Those
aerograms. Sure. I remember those. Yeah.
But little drawings that she would do on them, and I go back and I read them.
You've gone through those.
Yeah. Well, I go back through them because then you see things that you just skimmed over because the context was different at the time.
And it must bring back very specific memories.
Yeah, and reminders about things that I'd forgotten. And I love this quote. You say, "You feel that you can learn something about someone with something as simple as a note that they left. You can feel the emotion through the note. It could be something that's intimate or it can be something that's really blunt." Mm-hmm. And you really are looking into the soul of people.
It's kind of like, my mom describes my love for these found notes. She calls it people watching on paper. And since you and I are so curious about other people's lives, you can learn so much about someone just through some scrap of paper that was left behind blowing down the street,
It's different from an email too, right? Mm-hmm. When you know how they say you can misread an email?
Yeah, tone.
The tone of an email. There's something in a note when it's tactile, like you said, whether they're pressed really hard when they were saying something, or just in the structure of the way that they've written it, that you can see the humor or you can see the intent.
Totally.
But in Helvetica, in an email,
it might all kind of look the same.
There's so much missed.
True. And that said, as technology evolves, people are writing less and less. But you can still find stuff. To me, a found note is something that gives you a glimpse into someone else's life.
You also did another film called Medora.
Yeah.
And that was, when did that one come out?
Yeah, Medora came out about 5 years ago.
Okay, so you've got this other film, 17 Blocks, going through all of these years, and then you take a sidetrack and you go over to Medora.
Yeah. I read this article in the New York Times. John Branch is like one of my favorite journalists, Pulitzer Prize winner, great writer, and he wrote about this small town basketball team in rural Indiana, Medora High School. They had not won a game in years, and it was a town that was dwindling. The factories had shut down, meth had moved in, and these are the towns that built America, and these small towns with their local
foundation
factories.
Stones.
Yeah, and they literally, Medora is known for its bricks. It makes marble. A lot of the marble that's in the Washington D.C. at the Capitol Dome and the Lincoln Memorial.
Weird how that
it all comes
17 blocks and then Medora
they
to
are
Washington.
connected. I never thought about that till just this moment.
Yeah.
But you're right. But so this town was the ultimate underdog, and the basketball team hadn't won a game in many years. But it occurred to me as a big basketball fan and also as someone, I'm from Michigan, and we have our small towns that are similar. I thought, every game is going to be like really dramatic because every game is like a championship game. Maybe that's the one game
they're just looking for that win.
That's all they need is one win.
A win is winning the championship.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So a friend of mine, Andrew Cohn, he joined me down there for a year and a half, and we moved into the town, and they welcomed us. We played basketball with them, and we would film all their games and their lives at home, and I'd have tears in my eyes sometimes at the end of a close game because I wanted so badly for them to win, but what you saw was a really special community, and even if some kids were struggling, and there was the star of the team was homeless, living out of a car when we first got there. It's interesting because all the struggles I saw in inner city DC, I saw similar stories in rural America, and these places
in a different culture.
They're more bound together than they realize.
Right.
When you're fighting, when you have no economic opportunity and you're really struggling with poverty and all the things that come with it. But and in fact, the kids from that town, that team, I'm still really close with them, and making Medora was a really special experience. But
how long did you shoot that over?
It was over about a 3-year period, mostly a year and a half, and then kept coming back a little bit as some of the younger kids were graduating high school.
That's what I admire about, just reading about what you've done. I just admire that you've never waited for somebody to give you permission to do the things that you want to do.
Yeah.
And that's why you got things done.
You can. And let me be clear too, not every project turned from like Found Magazine, from some little zine into, 3 books and, all these magazines, and years later, hundreds of city tour.
But when you fell over, it helped you be better at doing the things that you ended up doing, right?
Yes, because there were times when I was so excited about something and so passionate and did put time and energy and effort and resources into it, and nothing much happened with it. But I thought, well, I learned something from this.
That's the key to it, is that whatever it is you do is a stepping stone to the things that you are technically successful at.
Yeah.
So that's, to me, why this analysis paralysis, this idea of overthinking whether you should do something because it's a pass or fail thing,
right?
It's total bullshit.
Yeah.
I think of some of the things that I have not managed to get off the ground. I learned so much from that process.
Yeah.
I could then apply it to things that ended up being
totally
a success.
And I don't even think it means that those ideas weren't good ideas, or that those projects
it just
didn't
might
have
not
their
have been
value.
the right time.
Yeah, maybe it wasn't the right time, or maybe there's other factors at play always, and people didn't catch on to it, or maybe your execution of it wasn't the way perfect. But it has to be a perfect storm.
I'm reminded of my dad always said it's easier to critique than it is to create. So when people critique, I always say to them, well, there's nothing stopping you, creating.
Yeah.
I'd love to critique something you've done.
Yeah. Go make something so I can.
They go watch a film and they say, "Oh, that was a piece of crap."
Right.
Dude, these people mortgage their house to get this done.
Yeah.
You have to admire.
You make sacrifices, and I think too, like, it's even your failures. When you look back, would I have rather spent? Yeah, I could have had more money and on a boat or on something else. Even those failures, like you have to enjoy it while you're doing it too.
Yes,
because
the journey.
The journey is ultimate. That's what our life is.
Well, I know that it took Clint Eastwood, if I'm not mistaken, 15 years to get $1 Million Baby made.
Mm-hmm.
And an Academy Award-winning director who did Unforgiven in 1992, and it takes him 15 years to get that movie made. Everybody passed on it.
Wow.
And he was determined to get it made. So, it was just a reminder that
it's never easy for anybody.
Never easy for anybody.
Yeah.
No matter whether you have an Academy Award or who you are.
Yeah. And it takes that passion, that spark, and also knowing that it's better to try and fail than to not try at all.
Well, I admire that in you. And speaking of people who've just got like unbelievable tenacity. You were on a assignment for GQ and did a story about somebody who achieved something which is mind-blowing to me.
Yeah,
I mean, I can't quite believe this story.
Absolutely, and I learned a lot about passion and drive through this young Marine named Julian Torres, and Julian's from Northern California, and he went to Afghanistan, lost both his legs to an IED blast, and came back to California and he was hurting. I mean, the transition from being not just a walking person to someone with no legs, and he got prosthetic legs, but from being a soldier and, sort of shaping your life around your job, and, that's something you wanted to be his whole life. And then to not be able to do that anymore, he was utterly lost at the age of like 23, 24. And he heard about a guy named Tim Medvitz from the Heroes Project, who takes wounded veterans, amputees, up to climb some of the world's highest mountains. So Julian hooked in with him, and Tim said, well, if you're serious about this, I'll take you to Mount Kilimanjaro. You can, we'll get you to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. I mean, Julian at the time, he was having trouble getting his groceries into the car, much less climbing a hill, much less climbing the tallest mountain in Africa. So, but he started training over the course of a year, and he got really fit. And then I got to go along with them, and Tim's climbed Everest multiple times, right? I've climbed Mount Baldy, it's 10,000 feet. It's over here at Mount San Jacinto in Palm Springs. I've never, so this was going to be a test for me too. And there were many times on the trail. It was a 12-day journey for us up Mount Kilimanjaro. And there's many times that Julian was way up ahead of me. And this is a guy with no legs. He's got prosthetic legs, but he's just fighting his way every foot. And at the end of every night, he had sores.
The stubs
were raw. They were bleeding raw, and it's quite dangerous in a way, because if they do get infected, they might have to re-amputate higher up his leg. And so, I mean, he really put a lot on the line to do this, and he was driven by the memories of some of his friends that lost their life overseas in combat, and he just showed such determination, and it was absolutely incredible to watch him. There's a place called the Barranco Wall. It's almost a 900-foot cliff, and it's you're not on ropes or anything, but it's just steep section after steep bluff. Little mini 15-foot cliffs, one after another after another.
Very precarious.
Very precarious. And if you do go over the edge, you're gonna tumble down quite a few of these. And just to see Julian, like, that sense of humor that he had, he just
made your writing easing.
Yeah. That was probably the easiest story I've ever had to write, because I just witnessed it all. And at the end of the night, I'd be, as soon as we get to camp, I'd want to go to sleep within 3 minutes. Julian would take out his chess set. He'd say, "Come on, let's play a game of chess before bed." I'm like, this guy's a maniac. But Julian became a lifelong friend to me, and that just happened being on that trip with him and getting to witness his passion and drive. And I think about him sometimes when I'm struggling. Say I have a writing deadline, and I'm like, I'll never be able to finish. I got 3,000 words to write before morning. I'm like, well, Julian
would Julian do?
Julian did conquer the Barranco Wall in a typhoon,
Well, he had very sore legs.
Yeah. So.
Well, you said about the climb, you said a guy with no legs should not be able to climb a mountain. It should be impossible. But here before me, the impossible is happening, one painful step at a time. You were witnessing something that is inconceivable.
Yeah. It was hard to put into words. Actually, there was a lot to write about, and at the same time, it was hard to describe what a powerful feeling it was to watch somebody push themselves to their very, very limits, and not just physically, but emotionally, because I could see everything that he was going through, and he was carrying a lot on his shoulders during that trip, and Julian Torres, I mean, I was so happy that I could just be there to witness it.
The number of people that I've spoken to have been through some life-changing experience, with the exception of maybe one, who is still trying to find answers. But the majority of them, Paul DeGelder, who was attacked by a bull shark, he talks about the fact that it was the best thing that ever happened to him, because this tragedy led to a better life.
And you know, my mom says the same thing. She was 29 when she lost her hearing, and she had a terrible illness, and the nerves from her brain to her ears were severed, so she lost all inner ear function. So not just hearing, but balance. She couldn't walk for a year. She was crawling, and I think in that moment when people have suffered a devastating loss, I think being contacted, you know, having someone like Julian Torres, you know, Tim Medvitz come into your life and remind you, like, it's going to get better, you're going to adapt, you know, and it's about the attitude that you have going forward. And honestly, I try to be that voice even when friends are going through like a broken relationship, you know, because that's like having a limb amputated sometimes.
Absolutely. A broken heart.
Yeah, broken heart.
Well, you know about that.
Yes, yeah.
Well, what is this article you wrote about 22 crushes?
Oh, I wrote.
That's a lot of crushes.
I wrote about.
You're prone to infatuation?
Yeah. Yes. California Sunday Magazine, great magazine. They were doing a special issue about, you know, your teenage years, and I just found, you know, you were talking about finding the letters that your mom wrote you, and you know, when you were away at school, and I just found this old journal of mine from high school, maybe, you know, junior high school, and there was literally one page where I had listed the 22 loves of my life. Yes. And I was 13 at the time.
Yeah, I have the quote. You said, at 13, I listed the 22 loves of my life with a red heart around each one. My crushes sometimes overlapped, but usually one shone brightest. And as the weeks or months passed, it would fade as another rose would take its place. Seeing the names again after so long transfixed me.
Because I was curious, you know, who were these women? I mean, I was 12, 13, they were too, but like, what became of
those wonderful women?
Yeah, and what has their trajectory been? And what, you know, there was something connecting us at that age. You know, what would it be like to talk to some of them again? And it was
that
really,
began the search.
It was fun to track some of them down and to find in a few instances, you know, that there was still some, you know, that my instincts hadn't been all wrong. Like, actually, these people had gone on to live lives, you know, where you know, what attracted me to them in the first place, you know, whatever their spark was, that was still shining brightly in them, and it was fun. It was really fun to kind of reconnect with them.
Reignite the teenage crush.
Well, I would say it wasn't so much that the crush was back on in full swing as much as just that human connection.
You realized there was something
friendship
about that in the first place.
Yes, yeah.
You said nothing releases the same set of endorphins and hits your pleasure centers quite like a teenage crush. Each one is its own particular joy.
Yeah.
The what if, the what could have been.
Well, I wrote this book, My Heart is an Idiot, and it's all personal essays about. These are more women I was dating in my 20s and 30s.
Very self-deprecating title.
Yeah, well, my heart has been an idiot over the years. Fortunately, came out the other end of that a little bit.
You've got love now in your life?
Yeah. A great wife, Margaret, and our beautiful 1-year-old son, Desmond. But I definitely had a rocky time of it for a very long time, and long enough time that I feel like I can give advice to other people who are in their 20s, 30s, 40s.
So what advice do you give to people who are struggling with love?
Well, mostly just that, you know, mostly that they'll find love again, because I think that's the biggest thing when somebody, when a relationship fails.
When the heart gets broken.
And the heart is broken, it's easy to feel like that's the end of the road, you know.
You don't need 22 crushes though, right?
Yeah, no. But just to remember, because people I think need to hear that, you know, and they might even know it intellectually, but to have friends or a stranger, you know, in a book writing, you know, to them kind of helps people, you know, remind people, okay, like this hurts and that's for good reasons, because I really cared, you know, and I really loved, but that you'll find love again. And so, you know, I think I like sharing personal stories, and just like when you meet people, I like being, you know, you could call it being nosy, but you could call it being curious. Yeah. But I like just digging right in and hearing people's real stories. And you know, I think my mom taught me that too, because of her deafness, she didn't have much time for small talk, because it was, you know, it took long enough just for people to communicate themselves. It was a lot of work just to do half an hour of banter before. So she'd start right in, you know.
Well, I'm glad you found love with Margaret.
Me too. It took a while.
Yeah.
But it took a while.
That's good for you.
Yeah.
Took your time, got the right person.
Yeah.
So the future, like anything on the horizon, something we should be looking out for?
Yeah. Just work. Well, we're going to bring 17 blocks out into the world later this year.
Yeah.
We're going to share.
Looks like you got a good
ways.
list of you said Tribeca?
Yeah. We've been at a bunch of other film festivals the past few weeks, and it's going to be out in theaters and on TV later in the year. But beyond that, I have a narrative film that I'm working on that I'm just writing right now. I'm also writing for a friend of mine, a filmmaker named Ross Partridge, great actor and filmmaker here in LA. And he read one of the essays in My Heart is an Idiot. It's called New York, New York. And it's about, in the immediate aftermath of September 11th, I went from Chicago, I took a Greyhound bus to New York just the next day to do some reporting for This American Life. And this essay is just about the people I met on the bus. You know, if you remember,
going there.
People, it was a mystery.
No
all the flights were canceled.
Yeah.
Everyone's just trying to get home from wherever they were. They're trying to get back home, you know, to New York, to wherever they were on the East Coast. And this is just about a bus full of people kind of bonding in the aftermath of this huge tragedy and trying to make sense of things. So Ross really gravitated toward this piece. So I'm writing the script and we're planning to film it next year. So that'll be a great one too.
Great, I love it.
Yeah. What about you?
I'm going to be the bus driver on your film.
Good. You're hired.
Hang on, everybody.
Well, the bus
it's going to be like Speed.
The bus driver in the essay is described as a kind of crazy-looking pirate. So,
how's this?
that I think you've got it.
Yeah, I can do crazy.
Yeah, you're hired.
Yeah. So I end the podcast with some questions. And speaking of driving, let's imagine you're going to drive across the country.
Mm-hmm. I love road trips across the country.
And you're going to take 3 people from any time in history in the vehicle with you. Who would you take with you?
This is awesome. Well, I think, you know, I love music. You always need good music on a road trip.
Yeah.
And I'm a Simon and Garfunkel guy, so I'm gonna have Paul Simon sitting in the back seat with his guitar, just playing some tunes for us. That would be, you know, usually I got him on the cassette deck. So
it's Paul Simon, or are you taking Simon and Garfunkel?
Let's take one. I'll take Paul Simon. Maybe we'll stop and visit Art along the way.
Because Garfunkel didn't play the.
He was a singer,
right? But he didn't play the guitar, right?
Yeah. I don't think so.
I think it was only Paul Simon.
Yeah. Paul Simon played the guitar.
Okay, so that's good. You got your music.
I got my music. I'm gonna take Jim Carroll. Now this guy wrote the Basketball Diaries.
Yes.
That way, if we stop along the way, we can shoot hoops.
Yeah.
I like on road trips. I like stopping to play basketball with people in each town I stop in, because that's a way to really get a sense of what that town is like and who lives there.
Yep. You're one more person in your car.
And I'm gonna go with Oprah Winfrey.
Okay.
All right. I just saw her speak in Colorado. And
you got inspired.
And I got inspired. Yeah, I didn't know that I would, because I haven't been an Oprah fan. I haven't really, you know, followed her story really that closely.
The last question I have for you is your last day on Earth. Like, let's say you could plan your last day on Earth. You could do whatever you want with it. What would you do?
Well, I would try to do what I do on my birthday every year, which is I try to climb a mountain and swim in the ocean. On the same day.
On the same day?
Yeah.
So from the peak to the ocean?
Yeah, because those are 2 of my favorite things to do, and that's just living, you know. I would obviously want to spend time with my son and my wife and my family, and probably have a big party at the end. Get some nice bourbon going.
You're a bourbon guy, huh?
Yeah, and maybe take a few swigs of that before midnight, but with a bunch of my closest family and friends.
Dude, you're awesome. You're such an interesting character, and
thanks, Phil.
Interested to see what you're gonna do.
Cool, man. Well, I look forward to staying in touch with you and sharing these projects, man. It's
really
been so great talking to you.
Appreciate your time.
Yeah, I appreciate your energy and your spirit. So,
wow,
thank you.
Feelings mutual.
Cool, man.
Yeah. Well, and what do we say? We say take it before you kick it.
That's right.
Right.
Absolutely.
That's what you live in.
So important.
BUCKiT, which rhymes with fuck it. I'm just gonna do it.
Fuck it. I mean, let's do it.
Boom.
Now's the time.
I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. To see more great interviews, go to philkeoghan.com and subscribe to BUCKiT with Phil Keoghan wherever you get your podcasts. Please consider rating and reviewing us. And follow BUCKiT, that's BUCKiT with an IT, on Instagram and Facebook. Also, follow me on Twitter @Phil Keoghan. Today's podcast proudly brought to you by BUCKiT Nutrition. Great tasting, high-performance nutrition to power your adventure. Don't forget to go to Amazon.com, search for BUCKiT Nutrition, and use promo code BUCKIT10, that's BUCKiT with an IT, and you'll get a 10% discount on all BUCKiT nutritional products. Just wait until you try the BUCKiT Booster with Manuka Honey.